Everyone knows the tooth test. Rub a pearl along your teeth, feel for grit, and if it is gritty, it is real. It works, and you should stop doing it. Tooth enamel sits around 5 on the hardness scale. Pearl nacre sits between 2.5 and 4. Your tooth is harder than the pearl, so every time you drag one across your teeth, you are not testing the surface, you are sanding it, and you are taking value off the thing you are trying to verify. There is a better test. 5 seconds, no equipment beyond a magnifying glass, and it catches the best imitations on Earth, including the ones that pass the tooth test. It is number 1 on this list, and jewelers do not go out of their way to teach it to you. 7 ways to tell if pearls are real, counting up to that one. One piece of vocabulary first, because getting it wrong costs people money in the wrong direction. Natural pearls form with no human involvement and are extraordinarily rare. Cultured pearls form inside a living mollusk that a human seeded. Imitation pearls are manufactured beads with a coating. And here is what people get wrong constantly. Cultured pearls are real pearls. Genuine nacre, laid down by a living animal, classified as real by every gemological authority. The word cultured describes how the process started, not what the material is. People sell inherited strands for nothing because somebody told them cultured means fake. Your opponents are 4. Plastic, light and obvious. Glass, coated beads heavy enough to fool you on weight. Shell pearls, ground mother of pearl compressed and coated. And Majorica, the high-grade Spanish imitations on a glass core with a lacquer coating, which are the most convincing fakes on the market and the reason this list has a number 1. Let us count them down. Number 7, shape and matching. Start across the room before you touch anything. Look at the strand as a whole. Real pearls grew inside a living animal that had no interest in symmetry. Even a beautifully matched high-grade strand, sorted by hand from thousands of pearls, shows small variation when you look closely. One is a fraction larger. One is a shade different. One sits very slightly off-round. Imitations come off a production line. They are the same size, the same shape, the same color, and they are flawless because a mold does not have bad days. So the rule inverts the instinct. Perfection is a warning sign. A strand where every single bead is identical is more likely to be manufactured than to be a rare and exceptional natural product. Nature does not do identical. Now the honest limit of this test, and I will give you one for every test on this list. Very high-grade cultured pearls are matched so carefully that variation gets subtle, and cheap fakes are sometimes deliberately made irregular to look authentic. So shape is a first impression, not a verdict. It tells you where to look harder. Number 6, temperature. Pick the strand up and lay it across the inside of your wrist or the back of your hand. Real pearls feel distinctly cool for the first few seconds, then warm gradually as they take heat from your skin. That gradual adjustment is the signature. Plastic gives itself away instantly. It sits at room temperature, neither cool nor warm, because plastic is a poor conductor and there is nothing to draw the heat. Now the limit, and it is a big one. Glass also feels cool. A coated glass bead will pass the first half of this test without any trouble because glass conducts heat much the same way. What glass does not do is warm at the same natural rate against skin. That is a subtle difference, and it takes handling real pearls to learn. There is also a practical condition people ignore. This test only works if the pearls have been resting at room temperature. Pearls that have been in a warm display case, in a pocket, or under a spotlight are already at body heat, and you will feel nothing at all. Which means in a shop, on the counter, under lights, this test is close to useless, which is worth knowing before you rely on it. Number 5, weight. Cup the strand in your palm and bounce it gently. Real pearls have a solid, satisfying density because nacre is a tightly packed crystalline material and it is considerably heavier than resin. Plastic fails this instantly. A plastic strand feels like nothing, hollow and weightless, and once you have held a real strand, your hand will never be fooled by plastic again. But here is where you must be careful, and this is the limit that catches people out. Glass is heavy. Shell pearls are heavy because they are made from compressed shell, which is genuinely dense material. And the good Majorica imitations are deliberately weighted to feel correct in the hand. Their manufacturers know about this test, so weight only eliminates the cheapest fakes. It is a good screen at a car boot sale or a flea market table. It is nearly worthless against a serious imitation, and if a seller is confidently handing you something to weigh in your palm, that may be exactly why. Number 4, luster. Now we move from the physical to the optical, and to the quality that actually decides what a pearl is worth. Luster is not shine. Those are two different things, and the distinction is the entire pearl market. Shine is light bouncing off a surface. Luster is light entering the translucent layers of nacre, reflecting from multiple depths and coming back out. That is why the trade says fake pearls shine and real pearls glow. Take the strand to a window, in daylight, not under a warm shop bulb. On a good real pearl, you should see your own reflection in the surface, and it should be sharp enough to make out. The light appears to come from inside the pearl rather than sitting on top of it, and around a strong reflection, you often see a soft halo where the glow spreads into the surrounding surface. On an imitation, the reflection sits flatly on the surface like light on a marble. It can be very bright, sometimes brighter than a real pearl, and that is the trap. Fakes are often shinier. What they cannot do is depth, because there are no translucent layers to reflect from, only a coating on a solid core. And underneath luster sits the quality that produces it, which is nacre thickness. A cultured pearl is a nucleus with nacre grown over it, and how long the animal was left to work determines how thick that layer is. Thick nacre gives that deep, wet, glowing quality and lasts a lifetime. Thin nacre gives a flat, chalky, slightly glassy look, wears through within a few years of regular wear, and can eventually let the bead underneath show through. You cannot measure nacre thickness by eye, but you can read its symptom, because luster is what nacre thickness produces. A pearl with weak, shallow, chalky luster is telling you the layer is thin, and that is the difference between a strand that outlives you and one that dies in a decade. The limit here is honest. Poor quality, real pearls with thin nacre also have weak luster, and they can look chalky and dull. So bad luster does not automatically mean fake, but it does always mean low value. Number 3. The surface under magnification. $10 for a loupe, and this is where the evidence starts becoming definite. Get a real pearl under 10 times magnification and look at what you are actually seeing. Nacre is built from thousands of microscopic platelets of aragonite, laid down in overlapping layers by a living animal over years. Under a loupe, that structure shows up as fine, irregular ridges, faint growth lines, tiny dimples, and small imperfections. It looks organic, because it is. Now look at an imitation. A coating is sprayed or dipped, so it flows and settles evenly. The surface is uniform, smooth, and often slightly glittery in a way that reads as sparkle rather than glow. GIA describes shell pearls specifically as having glittery coated surfaces without overlapping nacre platelets, and that phrase is the whole test. Overlapping platelets or a poured coating. Those are the two things you are choosing between. The limit is simply that you have to know what growth structure looks like, and the fix is easy. Find any real pearl you already trust, put it under the loupe once, and you will have the reference for life. If this is already useful, subscribe, because the last 2 tests are the ones that decide it, and the final one works even on the imitations that beat everything above. Number 2, the tooth test and what it actually costs you. Here's the most famous jewelry test in the world, and I'm going to give you both halves of it, because everybody teaches the first half and almost nobody teaches the second. The test. Rub the pearl gently along the biting edge of your front teeth. A real pearl feels faintly gritty, like extremely fine sandpaper. An imitation feels smooth and slippery, like a marble. The grit is real, and it has a cause. You are feeling the microscopic ridges between those overlapping aragonite platelets. A coating has no platelets, so it has no ridges, so it glides. And it genuinely works. It is fast, it needs no equipment, and it catches the great majority of imitations, including many good ones. Now the half nobody tells you. Tooth enamel is around 5 on the Mohs hardness scale. Pearl nacre is between 2.5 and 4. Your tooth is harder than the pearl, which means that when you rub one against your teeth, you are not gently sampling the texture. You are scratching the surface of a soft, organic material with something harder than it. Do it repeatedly, or do it with pressure, and you are wearing down the exact layer that produces the luster you are trying to verify. So here is my position. Never do this to a pearl that is not yours. Never do this to a fine strand. And if you must do it to something of your own, 1 light pass, no pressure, on a single pearl, and never again. And there is a version that costs you nothing. Take 2 pearls from the same strand and gently rub them against each other. Real pearls give the same faint, chalky resistance and can leave a trace of fine nacre dust. Imitations slide past each other with no friction at all. Same information, no teeth, far less damage. The other limit is the one that leads us to number 1. The very best imitations, the top-grade Majorica type products, are built specifically to give surface texture. Some of them do not glide the way cheap fakes do, which means the most famous test in the world has a blind spot exactly where the most expensive fakes live. Number 1, the drill hole. And here it is. The test jewelers do not volunteer, the one that costs nothing, and the one that catches the fakes that beat everything else on this list. Every pearl in a strand or an earring has a hole drilled through it for the string or the post. And that hole is the single place on the entire object where you get to look at a cross-section. Everywhere else, you see the outside. At the drill hole, you see the edge, and the edge cannot lie about what the pearl is made of. Get a loupe and look straight into the rim of the hole. On a real pearl, the nacre goes down into the hole with the material. The edge is clean and sharp, and along it, you can often see the layers themselves, fine concentric rings stacked one on the next, like tree rings in miniature. There is no boundary between an outside and an inside, because the pearl is nacre the whole way to the nucleus. On an imitation, there is a boundary, and it is unmistakable once you have seen it. A thin, darker line where the coating stops and the core begins, chipping and flaking where the drilling broke through the coating. Sometimes the core itself, visibly showing as white shell or clear glass or plastic. And on a strand that has been worn for years, the string itself abrades the coating around the holes, so the wear reveals the core without any help from you. This is the test that catches majorica and shell pearls. They can be weighted correctly. They can be given surface texture. They can be made shiny enough to fool you across a room, but they are structurally a coating on a core, and at the drill hole that structure is exposed by geometry itself. GIA notes exactly this on shell pearls, that the thin coating chips at the drill holes to reveal a white shell bead underneath. A coating has an edge. Real nacre does not. That is the whole test, and it is why it is number one. One practical note on running it. On a necklace, check more than one pearl, ideally the ones at the ends near the clasp, because those get handled and rubbed the most and show wear first. On earrings and rings, the hole is usually hidden inside the setting, so look where the post or the cup meets the pearl and use a light at an angle. And if a seller is unwilling to let you look into the drill hole of a strand they are selling as genuine, you have just been given the answer without anybody having to say it. Now, 3 bonuses, because there are things around the pearls that give the game away before you even get to the pearls. Bonus 1, the strand tells on itself. Look at the string between the pearls. Quality pearl strands are knotted, with a small individual knot tied between every single pearl. That serves 2 purposes. It stops the pearls rubbing against each other and wearing their own nacre away, and if the string ever breaks, you lose 1 pearl instead of all of them. Knotting is slow handwork, so nobody pays for it on a strand of plastic beads. An unknotted strand is not proof of anything, but knotting is a strong signal that somebody thought the contents were worth protecting. Then look at the clasp. Real pearls tend to be finished with real metal, so look for a purity stamp, 925 for sterling, 585 or 750 for gold, exactly as we covered in the hallmarks video. A cheap plated clasp on a supposedly fine strand is a contradiction. And look at the clasp for a name, because here is a gift. Majorica typically brands its clasps. The most convincing imitation on the market frequently tells you what it is, in writing, on the back of the necklace, and people simply never turn it over. Bonus 2, what a laboratory actually does, and the one thing none of these tests can tell you. This is the honest limit of this entire video, and it mirrors what I said in the video about testing gemstones. Every test on this list separates real pearls from imitations. Not one of them separates natural pearls from cultured pearls. And it cannot, because both are genuine nacre produced by a living mollusk. There is no difference in the material. The difference is entirely in what sits at the center and how it got there. That question is answered by looking inside, and only a laboratory can do that. GIA uses real-time X-ray microradiography and microcomputed tomography to read the internal structure of a pearl, looking for a bead nucleus versus solid concentric growth, and reading the growth features and nacre thickness. They can also use X-ray fluorescence to detect chemical additives that appear in some imitations. So if a strand is being sold to you as natural rather than cultured, and the price reflects that, no home test in the world verifies that claim. That one needs paper from a laboratory, and the gap in value between natural and cultured is enormous enough that the paper is worth its cost. Bonus 3. What destroys real pearls? Because passing the test is only half the job. Now that you can identify them, here is how not to ruin them. And this matters more with pearls than with any other gem. Remember the hardness, 2.5 to 4. That is one of the softest materials anyone wears. Softer than a copper coin, softer than a steel key, softer than the enamel on your own teeth. Pearls scratch against almost everything in a jewelry box, so they need to be stored separately, ideally in a soft pouch, never loose against metal or harder stones. Then chemistry. Nacre is calcium carbonate, and calcium carbonate is dissolved by acid. Perfume, hairspray, cosmetics, household cleaners, and even the natural acidity of some people's skin will dull the surface over time. The rule the trade uses is simple and worth memorizing. Last on, first off. Pearls go on after the perfume and the hairspray, and they come off before anything else. Never put pearls in an ultrasonic cleaner. It can loosen the nacre layers and it can destroy a strand outright. And never soak a strand, because the string absorbs water, stays damp inside, weakens, and stretches. Wipe them with a soft, damp cloth after wearing and let them dry flat. And one thing people find strange. Pearls do better when they are worn. The tiny amount of moisture from your skin keeps the nacre from drying out. A strand locked in a safe for 30 years can dry out and lose its glow. This is one of the very few things in jewelry where using it is better for it than protecting it. Bonus 4. Real is not the same as good. First, know what you are holding, because the type is usually readable on sight and the value range between them is enormous. Freshwater pearls are grown in mussels, mostly in China, often slightly off-round, in whites, pinks, and lavenders, and they are the most affordable by a wide margin because one mussel produces many at once. Akoya are the classic, saltwater, and mostly Japanese, famously round and white with a sharp mirror-like luster, usually 6 to 9 millimeters. South Sea are the giants, from Australia, Indonesia, and the Philippines, 9 millimeters up into the teens, white or deep gold, and the most expensive cultured pearls there are. Tahitian are the dark ones, naturally colored in grays, greens, peacock, and near black, from the black-lipped oyster. That matters immediately. If somebody offers you a 14mm round golden strand at a price that feels like a gift, the size and the color are telling you what the price is not. You have proved the strand is genuine. That answers one question and opens another, because real pearls run from a few dollars to hundreds of thousands, and the gap is decided by 7 factors that GIA uses to grade them. Here they are, in plain language, and you can assess most of them yourself now. Size, measured in millimeters, and price climbs steeply with it because large pearls are disproportionately rare. Shape, where perfectly round commands the most, followed by drops and ovals, with irregular baroque shapes the most affordable, though baroques have their own following. Color, which is body color plus overtone, that secondary shade you see floating over the surface. Luster, which we covered, and which matters more than everything else on this list combined. Surface, meaning how free the pearl is from spots, bumps, and blemishes. Nacre thickness, which decides whether it survives. And matching, which is how consistent the pearls are across a strand, and which represents an enormous amount of sorting labor. Notice what is doing the work there. 2 of the 7, luster and nacre, are about the same underlying thing: how much good nacre the animal laid down. That is where pearl value actually lives. Size and roundness are what people notice first, and what marketing sells hardest, but a big, perfectly round pearl with weak luster is a disappointing object, and a slightly irregular pearl that glows is a beautiful one. So how do you put this together in real life? No single test on this list is proof, and that is not a weakness. It is how identification actually works. Stack 3 of them. Look at the strand for uniformity. Get a loop on the surface and look for growth structure, and then go to the drill hole and look for the edge. If all 3 agree, you have your answer. If they disagree, you have found something worth taking to a professional, and that is exactly the point of running them. And when it matters, do the same thing this channel recommends every week. Take it to a good independent jeweler. They will put it under proper magnification while you watch, show you the drill hole themselves, and tell you honestly when a strand deserves a laboratory instead of an opinion. That costs almost nothing. And with pearls, it is often the difference between a strand nobody wanted and a strand worth more than everything else in the box. Now tell me in the comments what you found. The strand from your grandmother that turned out to be real. The one that turned out to be glass. The clasp that had a brand name stamped on it all along. I read every one. This channel takes no sponsorships and no paid placements. No brand, no dealer, and no auction house pays to be praised or buried here. And that independence is the only reason I can tell you that the most famous pearl test in the world is quietly damaging the pearls people run it on. If straight answers like this are why you keep coming back, the join button below makes you a member and keeps these breakdowns honest. A coating has an edge. Real nacre does not. Look at the hole, not the shine. I will see you in the next one.